Soundtrack of my life.
90.1
Hope FM.
and hopefm.com.
And welcome back to Soundtrack of My Life. Well, tonight I've got another very interesting guest, a storyteller. Graham Rogers, welcome. You describe yourself as a storyteller?
Yes, that's what I do for a living. Yes, I tell stories. When I was a child, I was always told off for telling stories, so I've got my own back.
You get paid for it?
Sometimes, yeah.
So that's your profession now, storytelling?
Yes, I work mainly in schools and museums, libraries, and I work with primary school age children. I've worked with adults, but I find it difficult telling stories to adults because you can't read what they're thinking, whereas children are always self-correcting, so if something's exciting, their mouths are wide open, their eyes are wide open, and if they're bored, they play with the Velcro on their shoes. So you know exactly where you are with children. Yeah.
But you didn't start off as a storyteller. You're also a great cyclist, aren't you, as well?
Yeah. I never used to be until a few years ago, and I used to sort of watch cowboy films when I was a kid and see these people ride out over the plains, and I thought I wanted to do that. Well, all the plains are now sort of built on, and there's not many in Britain, and I've never ridden a horse successfully, so the nearest thing I can get to is riding a bike. So about 5 years ago I decided to take up cycling, and I wanted to do a long distance cycle. So I trained for about a year. I nearly gave up a couple of times because I thought I was too old, and I cycled to Rome.
That is a long way.
You don't know where I'm cycled from yet.
That's very true, actually.
It could have been a mile outside Rome, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
It was from Faldingbridge, my home, which is
Am I allowed to say it now?
Yes,
that's a long way.
Yeah.
Graham, so did you wear a Stetson on this journey?
No, I wore a crash helmet, a cyclist helmet. I never used to wear them, but my mum said I must wear it, and so I did for my mum, and I've carried on wearing it now for my mum. She knitted it, I think.
I like that idea, though, sort of mounting your bicycle and thinking you're going out into the west.
Well, I was going to the south, yeah, but it wasn't sort of a religious trip. Rome was sort of, because I've studied a lot of history, or read a lot of history, and all roads lead to Rome, so I thought it would be quite easy to find, but so I just cycled off and ended up there, a month later.
I want to wind back now with your journey and find out how it is that you ended up a storyteller and cowboy cyclist. How did it all begin?
How did
your life all begin? Yes, the life of Graham Rogers. How did it all start?
I was born 10 days before the end of the Second World War. There was a film came out called The Last 10 Days of Hitler, and I was watching the film and looking at the dates, I realised the last 10 days of Hitler were the first 10 days of my life. So I contributed some way, I suppose, to the end of the war by being born. My parents lived in the East End of London, and my dad was in the Home Guard, and the house was a doodlebug fell just over the road a few days before I was born, and blew all the windows and doors out, so they boarded them up all temporarily, and I was born in the front room of our house, in a very sort of dark situation with no windows and glass. My brother was 5 years older than me, and he'd had a worse time because he'd had to sort of be a child through the war. I think he enjoyed parts of it, but he must have picked up, I think it's inevitable that he picked up some of the worry and angst that the parents are having. But it was sort of happy times when our kids. The war was open, war was over, and everyone was telling stories about the war. And I played on bomb sites, which I thought had been put there just for children to play on, which was great. And rationing didn't worry me. It began to worry me when it stopped, really, because I was non-stop being fed sweets by my parents, and I couldn't sort of work out why I was suddenly getting all these treats. But it was the end of rationing a few years later. So
just stop there a bit, Graham. I just want to visualise a little bit about what it was like in post-wartime London, and as you said, like a playground, because when we see the pictures it looks awful.
Well, I'm talking about a few years after the war, sort of when I was 5 years old, and we were allowed to go and play. My mum always told me to stay off the bomb sites, but I never did. And the bomb sites, of course, had grown over by that time. There was sort of various weeds had grown up, and plants and trees, and all the gardens that had been in the houses took over the fallen rubble. So that, in a way, they were quite sort of pretty places to a kid, I suppose, and trees were sort of dens you could build, and sometimes you could get into the cellars of a house, so that was very dangerous, but very exciting. And there was a lot of sort of various other places you could go, derelict places around East London, which I thought were great adventure playgrounds, yeah.
And your parents never thought of evacuating out of London?
They did during the war, but my brother went to Wales, was born in Wales during the war, and at the beginning of the war, and but of course when I was born it was over, so there was no point in being evacuated.
Absolutely. Now your father was a musician, wasn't he?
No, well, let's say a musician. He wouldn't call himself. He worked in the rag trade, but he played the guitar and sang songs. He liked when he was young to be the life and soul of parties. He went to a lot of parties before the children came along, before the war, and was always doing conjuring tricks. And he had a trick of walking around on his hands, which not everywhere, but it was just as a party trick. And he played the ukulele and sang songs, yeah.
And do you think that had an impact on you? Because apart from telling stories, you often accompany yourself.
I think it did, because he bought a guitar. I didn't know at the time it was a strange guitar. It was really a ukulele, but it was shaped like a guitar, and he played that as well. So there was a guitar laying around, and my brother got interested in music, and then through him buying a guitar, then I got interested in music, and I think that's how I got interested in music. Yes, and my father was certainly an inspiration for my storytelling, because he used to come home from work and tell me stories at bedtime. Like most dads, he fell asleep before the end of the story, so I'd lay in bed and be wide awake working out the end of what might happen in that story. So I think that's when I started making up stories for myself.
Let's hear your first record, because that sort of links into your father.
Yeah, all the rage at that time was just after the war, and probably before the war, but I certainly remember my dad singing lots of George Formby songs, and then falling about laughing at the double entendre, which was I didn't obviously get at the time, but this record is George Formby singing Chinese Laundry Blues.
Let's hear it.
Was a laundryman in the shop with an old green door. He'd iron all day, your linen away, he really makes me sore. He's lost his heart to a Chinese girl, and his laundry's all gone wrong. All day he'll flirt, scorch your shirt, that's why I'm singing this song. Oh, Mr. Wu,